Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. My name is Huzaifa Shabazz, and I serve as the senior researcher and advocate with the Council on American Islamic Relations. I want to thank you all for tuning in to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Today's topic is challenging anti-Muslim bigotry in Massachusetts. As some of you may know, earlier this week, we heard about a case in where a local McDonald's restaurant in Massachusetts allegedly stuffed a fish sandwich with bacon while serving a Muslim woman. In response, our Massachusetts chapter filed a complaint against McDonald's with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. To further discuss this topic, I am joined today by our guest, Legal Director of CAIR-Massachusetts, Barbara Dougan.
Hi.
Barbara, how are you doing?
Good. It's Dougan, but other than that, everything's
Dougan. Yeah. Next time, I got it. Well, thank you again for joining CAIR on Air. And so I wanted to just dive right in and get sort of some context behind the case. Could you describe the case, what happened, and give our viewers some context there, please?
Sure. It's a fairly clear-cut incident that happened. My client is a mother who went into her local McDonald's with her two little boys, 7-year-old twins. And she started to order for the children, saying that one of the boys wanted a fish sandwich, plain. And she was concerned that the employees might have a hard time understanding her because of her accent. So she asked her son then to also explain. So he said he wanted a fish filet of fish, plain. I should back up and just say when she came into the store, there were two employees at the counter, neither of whom greeted her, but simply talked about who would be the one to wait on her. The first employee left, never to be seen again. And when I say left, he went into the back area where food is prepared. So the second employee took her order, and my client paid for it and didn't notice that on her receipt, she'd been charged for an add-on, as they call them, of bacon, which in McDonald's world is 2 half strips of bacon. She didn't notice that. So she and her little boys are waiting for their order. A family comes in behind her with, I think, 2 or 3 children. They order their meal from a third employee. They all wait, and the family behind her is given their food, and they leave the store. So my client asked the third employee, I don't understand. We were here before them, and we're still waiting for our food. The third employee says, let me check, and he goes into the food prep area, never to be seen again. So finally, a fourth employee comes out and gives her the bag of food. When they left the store to go, they were going to eat outdoors, sort of like a little picnic. The little boy opens his fish sandwich, and there's at least 3 to 4 full strips of bacon that have been, stuffed into this. I appreciate you saying allegedly in the introduction, but if you've got the photo, you can show it, that there's a really unappealing amount of bacon that's stuffed into the sandwich. Yeah, there we go. Which this is after the little boy had eaten a little bit of the sandwich. But I count at least 3, 4 strips of bacon there. And then later on that evening, just a couple hours later, my client's husband and the boy's father went to the McDonald's and got a refund and showed the manager that food and got a refund.
Thank you, Barbara, for sharing that. And absolutely, it's a horrific image. Could you give us some sort of a little bit of detail or overview of the claim you filed with MDAC and how that kind of case is being approached?
Sure. It's when you file. This is not like a lawsuit in court. We're filing first as required by state law with an administrative agency. So all we can do is claim that discrimination occurred that was based on race, religion, and national origin. which is what we did. When you file at the Mass Commission Against Discrimination, unlike more typical lawsuits in court, you don't add in any other claims you might have. You don't add in a dollar amount. It's very straightforward. You ask the commission to find that our state public accommodations law was violated by McDonald's.
Thank you, Barbara. That's very helpful for anyone, non-attorneys out there who try to understand that context. So I want to kind of transition and kind of talk about if you have any details about the impact that it has on the family. If you can maybe speak to that right now. How are they doing? Could you speak to the impact that this has had on them?
Well, sure. I mean, initially, as we say in our complaint, the little boy asks his mother, why did they do this to us? Do they hate us? And as she said in the statement that she issued, how is a mother to answer that question? Mm-hmm. I mean, the impact on the family is something we'll discuss, hopefully, in more detail with McDonald's. But generally, I've handled hate crimes cases and discrimination cases for over 25 years. And I think the ones that are the most heartrending to me are the ones where young children are the targets. I mean, if you're going to express your Islamophobia, pick on somebody your own size. Is that too much to ask? I mean, we have probably several adult workers engaged in this, in this effort to humiliate and insult this mother and her young children. They're 7 years old. So I think it's always tough when you have to explain to children, yes, there are people in this world who are mean, and there's more specifically people in this world who will try to hurt you due to nothing more than your religion. I mean, that's a sad, milestone for any parent to pass with their children. And I'm sorry they had to learn that hard truth this way.
Absolutely. And Barbara, could you give us your opinion on what you expect as a response from McDonald's? Do you think they're going to take action on this issue?
Well, I can't speak for McDonald's at all. We'll find out what the response. But my hope is that you're talking about a company with a national and international reputation that will want to do the right thing here. I think the facts of our case are rather hard to get around that this was an intentional act. I mean, how else do you end up with at least 4 strips of bacon in a sandwich? That's not what a McDonald's add-on looks like. So my hope is certainly that they will want to do the right thing. And a big piece of that is going to be what they do in-house in terms of training for their own staff. I mean, you can think however you want when you're on the job, but you can't be pulling stuff like this because it's illegal. It's going to cost your employer a lot of trouble. And, actions have consequences. So I'm really hopeful that McDonald's will use this as, a quote, teachable moment to tell their staff, you can't be doing this stuff. And there's going to be serious consequences for those who are found responsible.
And speaking of civil rights cases, you recently released the CAIR-Massachusetts Civil Rights Report. Congratulations on that. And I urge everyone to read it. And I'll ask my producer to drop a link to that in the comments if possible. Could you maybe just give our viewers a bit of context on the statewide trends that you saw concerning anti-Muslim bigotry and any sort of high-level findings of the report?
I think the main thing we saw was there was a drop in the numbers of requests we got for assistance, which I think is very obviously due to the pandemic. The example that we give that stood out most clearly is that for about a year, we didn't get any calls about bullying because most kids were, in doing remote learning. But this past fall, when students went back to the classroom, we saw back up to the usual level of calls about bullying by students, as well as bullying behavior by staff members and teachers too.
Yeah, and I concur with that assessment because, as you know, we also did a civil rights report at the national level,
Right.
and we found the same trends and an increase actually in bullying. So we had about approximately 140 incidents. And we also saw that as students were returning back to in-person instruction, we did see those increases in complaints. I think so. Barbara, just the last point here to close. Does a report mention, or do you mention any sort of recommendations you think would be good?
Well, it depends on who they're directed at. I mean, we certainly, some kinds of cases involve public policy, and whether it's law enforcement or public schools. I'm not sure who else off the top of my head, but those involve public policies where you need to have your elected officials committed to taking any incidents or discriminatory policies very seriously. A lot of other issues revolve around private parties, such as here, a restaurant in a public accommodations case, or I think most usually it's employers in the workplace setting. So there are laws in place that say most of this behavior is illegal. The courts or other agencies decide those claims, but again, employers or other private parties, and in this example, McDonald's, need to be committed to having a workforce that is aware of what those laws are and know that it's expected of the institution, whatever it is, that they will comply with the laws that are on the books. That's
Absolutely.
what we would hope.
Yes, and we continue to see that public accommodation complaints and employment discrimination would continue to be one of the most frequent complaints that we receive nationwide. So thank you, Barbara. This concludes the end of CAIR. I want to thank you for joining us and providing our audience an overview of this case. We hope for the best, and we'll be cheering for your team here in CAIR-Massachusetts.
Well, hopefully we can do an update and report on a good resolution.
Absolutely. Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for our viewers, don't forget to join us next week. We also encourage you to fill out participate in our voter survey. I'm going to have the producer drop it in a link. This is to better understand, as the elections are coming up, the views of the American Muslim community. So I urge everyone to participate and take that survey. And again, CAIR on Air airs every Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Until then, peace be with you all, and Assalamu alaikum.